So as promised, I'm back. I haven't read enough of the appetites to get back to this. Maybe I'll read it. I'll catch up. So we need to be. I read a bunch of the introduction, but I want to read up. So I skipped to in the appetites. I skipped to the chapter that seemed most interesting, and I thought it was good enough that I was motivated to go back and skim through the rest. But I want to read all the way to where I thought things got interesting, and then I might go back and read through some of my highlights if I think it's worth it. But now we're reading about Buddhism again. So back to words that I can barely pronounce. So this chapter is called The Monasteries. Chapter 13. I don't really remember that much about where we were, but I mean, we talked about like heaven and hell and they just like general Buddhism things like Eightfold Path and morals within Buddhism, being reincarnated, and I really want to reread this. Couple, like I think it was a couple weeks ago. I read this nursery rhyme that I kind of bumbled through. I think if I reread it in like a more poetic way, it'll sound better. So I want to make sure my voice is getting still. It's my microphone. Sorry, 1 second. Hello, I'm talking. Hello. Okay, it's working. Cool. Sorry. We will proceed. It says, outside of every village in Burma, no matter how small, there stands a Pong Yi Kyong. There may have been no one wealthy enough or zealous enough to build a pagoda, or the proximity of some ancient some ancient and eminently famous shrine may have rendered unnecessary a general subscription for such a purpose. But there is always a building for the mendicants. Away from the noise, the people for the monastery must not have secular houses near it, surrounded by great well-foliaged trees, tamarinds, mangoes, jacks, coconut, and areca and palmyra palms, sal trees, and a tha-bai bin to shield them from the heat and supply them with fruit. The monk's position is well calculated to attract those who are tired of the tumult and bickerings and sorrows of the world. There the Pian Sin pass their time without a care to ruffle the tranquil currents of their lives, without trouble as to their food, for a pious and kindly population supplies them far beyond their wants, with no irksome duties, that for nothing is required for them of them in return, with no care but how to get through the day with as little trouble and ennui as possible, seeking nothing but the fulfillment of the law and the path to eventual deliverance from the misery of ever-recurring existences. No wonder many novices come to lake the ways of the religious house, and yearly swell the ranks of the order, so that there are no signs 2,500 years after the founding of the religion of any weakening of its strength. To the first Beikus, Beikkus, dwelt under the shade of the forest trees, or perhaps in small huts erected there to shelter them from the pitiless sun and the raging of the storms. This is the explanation of the circumstances that every bud, B-U-D-H, is specially connected with some tree, as Shin Gautama with the Bodhi Bin, the Banyan, under which he attained his full dignity, and the Engyin Bin, ENG-GYIN-BIN. So, a weird word there. Engyin Bin, the Sharia robusta, under which he was born and died, and as we are told, the last bud of this world cycle, Arimedea, will receive his Buddhaship under the Mesuophoria. I guess that's another type of tree, because all these, it's talking about how everyone's like linked to trees. Some I'm seeing some Avatar references here. Hence the regard for trees which the Burmans share with so many other nations, ancient and modern, and the fact that a clump of palmyros and tamarinds seen in the distance infallibly suggests a monastery. It is not to be supposed, however, that it was the intention of the Lord Buddha that the sacred order should remain far away from mankind, in lonesome huts in the depths of the forest. Very early in his teaching, kings, nobles, and wealthy men vied with one another in erecting spacious, magnificent dwellings for the Buddha himself and his disciples. Most noted among these were the Zetawan monastery, built by the rich man Anatabin, within which the celebrated Mingala thought sermon was preached by the Buddha to a pious-minded Dewa, the Papayan Kyong, and that of Weluwun, Weluwun, built by the wealthy Dame Withaka and King Bimbathara of Razagyo, to both of which Shin Gautama frequently retired to spend the rainy season of Lent. These went all magnificently adorned, and it is expressly mentioned that the pious need spare themselves no expense in constructing and adorning such religious buildings, though the inhabitant of the most gorgeous of them dresses in no way differently from the humblest anchorite, and has no more costly utensils. Ordinarily, the monastery is built of teak, though in many places, both in Mandalay and Lower Burma, brick buildings are being erected, notwithstanding the prejudice that exists against them from their greater liability to damage in the case of earthquakes. The shape is always oblong, and the inhabited portion is raised on posts or pillars, some 8 or 10 feet above the ground. They are like all the other houses in the country, never more than 1 story high, for it is an indignity to a layman to have anyone's over his head, and it is much more so to a member of the brotherhood. The space between the ground and the floor of the kyong is always kept open and is never used except by the schoolboys who have not arrived at notions of personal dignity and find the locality retired and convenient for games at gan yin to and the discussion of forbidden eatables or subjects of conversation. There are always a few pariah dogs there too, dozing off the surfeit food they have not had from the morning begging pots, or the offerings at the pagoda. A flight of steps of stone or wood leads up to the veranda, which extends all along the north and south sides, and frequently all around the building. If the steps are of stone, or rather brickwork covered with plaster, they are usually adorned at the foot by propylaea. Okay, they do the thing where they combine the A and the E into one letter. Okay, make sure I don't lose the word. Where was I? Propylaea. There it is. Yeah. Weird. I don't know how to pronounce that when they combine the A and the E. I'll just say propylaea. Move on. In the shape of 2 bilis, or a couple of Menathaia. Curious creatures, half man, half lion, usually bold enough in conception, if somewhat rough in execution. Tiers of trefoil, Trefoil. Trefoil. Heads usually characterize the parapets when they are of mason work, whether the latter is of wood or is covered with spirited carvings in deep relief representing gnats and ogres, dancing figures and grim warriors, and with abundant scrollwork as everywhere else throughout the building. From the raised floor thus reached rises the building. From the raised floor thus reached rises the building, with tier upon tier of dark massive roofs, giving the appearance of many stories when there is actually but one, for the reason already mentioned. This style of roofing was allowed only for religious buildings, for the royal palace, and for the houses of a few high officials who acquired the honor by special patent, and with whom the form and number of roofs was a matter of regulation settled by the sumptuary laws. Under the British rule, it is practically confined to the monastic buildings and the houses of feudatory chiefs. The spire-like style of roof is called the pyathat, and properly there are but three kinds, with three superimposed roofs called yama, with five roofs called thuba, and seven, as the royal palace and the most sacred kyongs, called thuyama. The ends of the gables are adorned with pinnacles on finials. I feel like that's an English word. I just don't know. So I'll Google that one. Okay, so finials are like little frilly things. I don't really have a good example. Like if you ever see the beginning of a handrail, sometimes there's like a bit that comes up and like makes a knob or something. There's like looks like somebody sculpted it, but it's made out of wood usually. That's what I would call a finial. So I'll repeat the sentence. The ends of the gables are adorned with pinnacles or finials, each with a curious wooden flag at the top and crowned with a hati gilt. Gilt, G-I-L-T. I don't know. I can't say it not like the word guilt, but it's spelled like G-I-L-T. So I don't know. And furnished with bells, copper, silver, or gold, the whole being elaborately carved. The triple, quintuple, and septuple roofs of the monastic houses, with the elaborate adornments, there is little doubt found their origin in the opportunity which wood gave for the development of ornaments in the way of carving. If the wooden monasteries are compared with the strikingly similar wooden churches in Norway, at Hitterdal, for example, or Borgund, we have a proof that nature under like circumstances always produces like results from human ingenuity. It may be added that the simple tumulus, which was the original idea of the bell pagoda, is also found in the Scandinavian hog. Okay, well, I'm curious. Burmese bell pagoda. Okay, that's interesting to look at. Okay, and then I could do, what did they call it? They said the Scandinavian hog. I wish I was sharing my screen. Oh, that's a table. Okay. Church. That's not it. Maybe if I type church architecture. I wouldn't say that looks that much similar to the bell pagoda. What am I saying? It may be added that the simple tumulus, which was the original idea of the bell pagoda, it is also found. So maybe it's the word tumulus I'm being confused by. Tumulus. I'll be here all day trying to learn to read. Oh, misspelled the word tumulus. Tumulus is a mound of earth and stone raised over a grave or graves. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm beginning to see the Scandinavian hog, I think. Yes. It's spelled Haga. So that would be why I'm confused. We have the burial of Oleg of Novgorod in the tumults in 1912. It's like a big old hill, but fancier. Okay, got it. Let me just type in Scandinavia so I can get to the point. All right, burial mounds were in use until the 11th century in Scandinavia. In their undamaged state, they appear as small, man-made hillocks, though many examples have been damaged by plowing or deliberately damaged so that little visible evidence remains. By burning the deceased, it was believed that the person was transferred to Valhalla by the consuming force of the fire. The remains were covered with cobblestone and then layer of gravel and sand, and finally in a thin layer of turf. All right. And it keeps going, but that's all I care about. So it's basically it. The kyong accommodation is very simple. It consists in the main of a great central hall divided into two portions, one level with the veranda where the scholars are taught and most of the duties of the monastery carried on, and the other is a raised dais 2 feet or so above the level of the rest of the building. Seated upon this, the yahans are accustomed to receive visitors, and at the back against the wall are arranged the images of Buddha, a large one usually standing in the center of a kind of altar with candles, flowers, praying flags, and other offerings placed before it, and on the shelves alongside a number of small figures, gold, silver, alabaster, clay, or wood, according to the popularity of the kyong and the faith of the neighborhood. Close by are placed models in wood of monasteries and pagodas, the fans and other religious implements of the Pien Sin, and the gifts of the pious, heaped together ordinarily in very careless fashion. The central image is almost invariably placed on the eastern side of the building. There are occasionally dormitories for the monks, but as a rule they sleep in the central hall, where the mats which form their beds may be seen rolled up round the pillow against the wall. In many monasteries there is a special room for the palm scribes, often detached from the main building, as are the cook room and the bathing house. The whole area of the extensive compound in which the monastery stands is enclosed by a heavy teak fence with massive squared posts, and the rails 7 or 8 feet high. All within the Paro one is sacred ground, and the laity when they and I'll repeat the sentence because I'm confused. All within the Paro one is sacred ground, and the laity, when they enter, take off their shoes and carry them in their hands. This rule applies to the highest in the land, and when a shan, prince, or a high official arrives on his elephant, he must dismount at the monastery gate and come in reverently barefooted. Within the one encircling fence, there may be and usually are quite a number of separate buildings like that described with their ecclesiastical roofs towering up, dark or glittering with gold leaf among the bright green foliage of the pipal and the tamarind trees. Each house has a prior or superior with his 2 or 3 brethren and a certain number of probationers and scholars, and in the central building dwells the Gying Oak or Sada. In a corner of the compound, or just outside, there is almost always a thane, a building for the performance of various rites and ceremonies, more particularly for the examination and ordination of yahans. The ground on which these stand is not only holy now, but also has always been so since the Lord Buddha first preached the law. When a new thane is to be built, it is usually found possible to exhume the remains of any old building of the same kind, thus proving that the immemorial sanctity of the site. Otherwise, the ground is dedicated to religion in perpetuity. The consecration of the ground is, however, rare. But sorry, I looked away. Where was I? However, rare in these latter times, though several times the British government has been asked to make a formal grant of land to be used for religious purposes. Not far from Rangoon, in the neighborhood of Kyak Ka San, pagoda of the Gyeongsangbuk pagoda, there is a Thine Ge, regarded as particularly holy from the tradition that it is built over the remains of one of the Yahanda who brought the remains of Shingatama to Rangoon. Within the monastery precincts are usually also one or two tasongs, highly ornamented tectums erected over an image of the Buddha. Very many zealous priors put up marble stones or finger posts at certain points beyond the per one, with inscriptions of them to the effects of Yu Adeseya's or Pienzyazatawa's monastery is to the westward or southward, and you must not kill animals or conduct yourself in an unseemly manner near it. It is the ignoring or the ignorance of this injunction which has brought many sporting Englishmen into trouble, and led them to believe that the Yahans condemned shooting altogether, and lay themselves out to thwart it, whereas the intention is only to avoid witnessing, if possible, what they regard as a flagrant sin, and especially to protect the pigeons, which usually flock about the monastic trees. Not many people in England would think of going to shoot in a churchyard. The majority of the kyongs in the jungle and in the similar towns are plain teak wood, or brick and lime structures with more or less ornate carvings and molding and interior decorations. But to see the really gorgeous ecclesiastical buildings, one must journey to Mandalay. There, the Gyeongda-gyi, the royal monastery, is the most striking collection of edifices of their kind to be seen in the world. At the foot of Mandalay Hill, just outside the eastern gate of the city, it extends over an area of good many acres. Every building in it is magnificent, every inch carved with the ingenuity of a Chinese toy, the whole ablaze with gold leaf and a mosaic of fragments of looking glass embedded in a resinous gum, while the zinc roofs glisten like silver in the sun, and the golden bells of the gable spires tinkle melodiously with every breeze. The huge posts are gilt all over or covered with a red lacquer. The eaves and gables represent all kinds of fantastic and grotesque figures. The interior is no less elaborate. The panels of wall and ceiling are so carved, so are the panel where was I? The interior is no less elaborate. The panels of walls and ceiling are some carved, are some carved, some diapered. I don't know what that word means again. Allow me to Google it. Diapered. No, that's diapered. Diapering is it's a geometric floor pattern. Oh, okay, that's a little too. Don't Google image search the word diaper. That's a mistake. Okay. So I'll just read the definition. It says diaper is any of a wide range of decorative patterns used in a variety of works of art, such as stained glass, heraldic shields, architecture, and silverwork. Its chief use is enlivening of plain surfaces. Okay. With them, so the interior is no less elaborate. The panels of wall and ceiling are some carved, some diapered, with the mosaic mirror work glistening like polished metal with a rough gold mesh net thrown over it. The wood carving is particularly fine, affected in some places where the birds taking wing, alighting, and in every other variety of attitude are so cut to appear to underlie the profuse flower tracery being especially clever. The amount of gilding spread thickly over every part of the kyong alone represents many £100, singular from its plain, unadorned appearance is the high brown teak wood tower in one corner, to which the Sarakye and his monks occasionally withdraw to devote themselves to contemplation and the tasks of learning to know themselves, and the Kyan and the Khandas, as well as the Sate and the Sake Thit. For this withdrawal from their gorgeous surroundings to indulge in abstract thought, they have the example and precept of the Lord Buddha himself, who even when he reposed as a babe of the bosom of his aunt Gautami, gave himself over to contemplation. The whole of the flat land between Mandalay Hill and man, this is already starting to itch. And the city walls are formerly enclosed with monasteries, each of them standing separate and enclosed within its own para one, and almost all presided over by a sada, a monk of the highest rank. They were thus entirely independent of each other. One of the most interesting for Englishmen is the Thiho Taik, the Ceylon monastery, presided over by Lingayama, a sada who was in great favor with Min Don Min, the king but one, the last king but one. The term take is always taik is always applied to a bishop's monastery, as implying that his is the chief of a number of kyams, all under his care, and in which he makes occasional sojourns. The Thiho Taik is um, peculiar for its trim appearance. It is very new. The underpart of all these buildings, is of brick. The compound is very scrupulously clean. There is not a single large tree in it, and the Paro one is a neat sawn wood fence, instead of being, as it is the case almost everywhere else, composed of a single huge stem of trees placed side by side in the ground. The Sada himself is a very enlightened man. He has been several times to Rangoon to worship at the Great Pagoda and to decide on questions in dispute. He has in his library copies of the English scriptures and the Burmese version of Judson, and has read through them through, through numbers of American Baptist tracts and the sacred books of other religions. Have also been a place in his manuscripts chest. Um, These are all deposited in a separate building standing in the middle of the enclosure and used for no other purpose except that the scribes sit here making copies of borrowed MSS. I don't know what an MSS stands for, or setting down notes of the learned bishops himself. The palm leaf book is still universal. The work of making up sorry. The work of making up a volume is therefore very laborious, for the most practiced manipulator cannot. Jesus. Okay, I'm gonna have to mute myself here. I'm back. I'm not using this headset. I'm gonna take it off. Maybe my hair looks a little bit funny, but that's the way it is. Man, I'm bald as fuck. Okay. I totally forgot where I was. Building is a brick. Post. Guy goes to Rangoon. Copies of English scriptures. MSS. Palm leaf books. Alright, I'll start here. The palm leaf book is still universal, and the work of making up a volume is therefore very laborious. For the most practiced manipulator cannot, with his agate style and light strip of palmyra leaf, exceed the speed of an English boy who has just gotten over the preliminary difficulties of pot hooks and hangers. The letters scratched on the leaf are made more distinct by the application of crude earth oil. This serves to darken the writing as well as to preserve the book. The regular scribes are always laymen, and it is a matter of very considerable unpleasantness to the Cenobites that the cleverest of them are very often uncommonly bad livers. Spending all their gains in libation of Old Tom, quote unquote Old Tom, or little balls of opium. I see. The vagaries are, however, frequently winked at, for a copyist who can write neatly and with accuracy is far from being common. Same thing, but I worded it the wrong way. Okay. The Thiho Tyke is a library, is a model in its way. It is nearly the most monastic collection in Mandalay, and it is certainly far better arranged than any other. The Sidikes or script boxes are arranged in 3 rows, one over the other. The thoughts and zats, the sermons and birth stories of the Lord Buddha below, and above them, the Sinhalese commentaries and exegeses, and on the top shelf, Burmese translations and the explanations of various learned sadawas. Each chest contains a large number of different books, every separate collection of leaves being enclosed between wooden boards, some plain, some carved in high relief, with figures of devas and demons. Round this is wrapped a kabalwa, a square piece of wood cloth with inwoven scenes from the sacred books or portions of the law and the formulae used at the pagodas. Most of these are of silk, very often with narrow slips of bamboo worked in so as to give stiffness to the whole. Instead of this, or sometimes in addition, is used the Sasi Gyo, a ribbon about 2 fingers breadth and upwards of a yard in length. This knitted or crocheted in a peculiar close fashion, which puzzles English ladies. On it is worked the name of the owner, his title and distinctions, and whatever other aspirations he chooses to add. They are very neat and quite easy to read, an advantage which does not always characterize the Berlin wool work. The king's grants of forest land monopolies and the like were usually executed in this way. All the boxes are kept carefully locked, and the door is barred at night. For such a library represents years of labor, and could only with the greatest difficulty be replaced. It is only in Mandalay that libraries of any value are to be found. In Lower Burma, the majority of the Kyongs do not even possess a complete copy of the 3 parts of the Bita Gat, the Buddhist Bible, and some few have nothing beyond a copy of the Kamawasawa. Jesus. These foreign words are so hard to say. Kamawasa, and perhaps Amala Lingaya Wutu, a life of the Buddha, or something of the kind. Many others have no doubt valuable collections, but the monks are ignorant. They cannot read the books of themselves, and they do not care to exhibit them to those who can. Consequently, they moulder away to the bottom of the Sadike, crushed away in the darkest corner of the main room of the monastery. It is perhaps not surprising that the most learned monks do not belong to the large towns, but come from the remote Kyangs in the depths of the jungle. This is true also of Upper Burma, for though the Sadawas in Mandalay are the most learned in the country, they have acquired their reputation in jungle monasteries and have only been summoned to the royal city when their fame has spread over the lands and the title of royal teacher has been conferred upon them. The main room of Lingayama's monastery contains a great number of curiosities collected by the Burmese embassies. On these travels through Europe, most of these are presented by the Kinwunge, the head of the mission, and are in many ways most interesting. Prominent is a large photograph album emblazoned with the Italian royal arms and containing a fine collection of views. Another album is filled with carts of members of the embassy, notably of the lamented Naingyan Ya. Man, I'm just gonna struggle. I don't know. Naingan-Gyaw. Woon Dak, Wun-Dauk. The portly and good-natured Pio No No of the Daily News, who seems to never have missed being photographed wherever he went, and figured in every style from the penny smudge apparently taken on a country race course or outside Battersea Park to the colored and gilt grandeur of a Neapolitan cabinet. The author of the Encyclopedia of Burmese Literature had no notion of changing the expression of his face, however. He looks stolidly, like just having had his dinner, and every impression and the multiplication of photographs serves principally as a means of comparing different styles of art, and exhibiting the great stock of clothing which the worthy Woondak carried about with him. In addition to photographs, there is a great collection of engravings, some of them very valuable. Mixed up with these are found to be some very queer items: old hotel bills, advertisements of gigantic hosiery establishments with pictures of the same at the top, circus playbills, shilling view guides, some sheets of the front pages of the wrapper of Punch, and a few railway tickets. There are all These are all carefully preserved, along with many other gifts of the home-keeping pious rolls of yellow cloth, Dutch clocks, betel nut boxes, spare spittoons and begging pots, rugs, and pots of honey. The images of the Kyong, contrary to the usual customs, are placed in a glass case in the center of the room instead of at the east end. The situation is due to their value, most of them being of silver or gold, and one or two studded with precious stones. The Thiho Taik was certainly one of the neatest and most methodically arranged monasteries to be seen anywhere. Unfortunately, it was burnt with many others in the years of the annexation. There were many more gorgeously decorated, and still more that were larger. The biggest in Burma was probably the Yahatana Pongda. Mahayatana Pongda, which stood near the great Arakan Pagoda. Araka. That's like, I'm trying to remember. Okay, Araka is like to the west of the mountains of Burma. You got like, what's the? Damn it, it's so bad. I should know. I don't know why. I'm expecting myself to know the geography of Burma, but I remember that there's like this like southern piece of Burma that is very. All right, I'm just gonna look up where the Arakan. We'll look up the word again so I can know what I'm looking for. The Arakan Pagoda. Araka, Burma. Because I remember, yeah, Araka is on the western coast of Burma, but what is like the southern coast of Burma called? It's definitely like a delta where all the rivers are reaching the ocean, but yeah. Okay. Pretty. Google Earth gave me some pretty images of Araka. I don't know why I went on such a tangent about that. I guess I just saw a word I recognized. So I'll just restart the sentence. The biggest in Burma was probably the Mahayatana Pongda, which stood near the Great Arakan Pagoda in the suburbs of Mandalay, and was in great part burnt down in 1879. The building, with its encircling platform, measured 440 feet by 200 and was supported by 404 massive teak trees, none less than 2 feet in diameter, and the central posts, which upheld the topmost tier of roof, must have been quite in 80 feet in height. Near Maulmain in Lower Burma, there is another kyong remarkable for the huge girth of its posts. The brick monasteries are commonest in the neighborhoods of Mandalay and other capitals. They are covered with chunam, and in place of having a spire, are themselves built in the form of a pia thot, rising in the shape of a rectangular terrace to a considerable height around the central hall, which is often divided into by a gilt railing across the center, and are a number of cloisters and corridors, which ensure a perpetual cool breeze. Many of these monasteries are adorned with fresco paintings in the hall and the honeycomb of corridors, representing usually scenes from the Zats, passages in the life of Shingatama, and an especially favorite one being the Jataka of Nemi, where the pious prince is represented as a white ghostly figure in a chariot, passing like the pious. Oh my God, they do another one of these combined AEs. So like the pious anus. Yes. Oh my God, the camera's not open, so I can't tell what I'm showing you. Focus, focus, focus. There it is. So I don't know. That means um, passing like the pious anus through the dismal abodes of hell and the sixth heavens of the Nats. Some other representations portray the occupation of daily life, such as feasting, hunting, weaving, and the different nationalities to be seen in the country. A very common scene shows the punishment which awaits fishermen in the next existence. The miserable destroyer of animal life is represented as dangling by the tongue of a fishhook, while demons jerk him into the air and drop him back into a lake of burning pitch. Many of them have inscriptions below to explain the subjects of the pictures. Thus, in pagan or in pagan, not pagans, pagan is a location. I went to hello, so okay, so I won't be leaving quite as soon as I thought. When King Nabin Mingye reigned in Methila over the 10 governors, according to the old books, the Thagya Nin came from the Nat heavens to help him. In the monastery Yatana, Shwe dying, our Lord preached the Tenan Tagayo and remained several days. Shin Thumeda in the land of Thuda. Oh my God, I'm skipping all this. This is all gibberish. And so on in great variety. One also often finds such a notice as this scrawl on the wall. In order to be prepared and to gain happiness in the seats of men, of Nats, and of Naban, the rice pots are set in order, the images are erected, and the paintings on the walls painted. The monasteries are built. That's like a Confucian sort of saying. Do the thing that the nobles would do. Act as they would. Anyhow, the monasteries are built, supported, and furnished by the pious, but they are not a few of them that have consider they. There are not a few of them, and that have considerable sums of money laid away, usually under the control of the Kapiya Dayaka, the laymen who live in the Kyong, and provides for the wants of its inmates. A number of royal fields round about Binle, where the Burmese army assembled to seek victory before entering on a campaign, were set apart for the use of the royal monastery at Paya Gye, and the revenues were kept in a huge money chest, which was always under the care of a guard of soldiers. Much of the money was devoted to the adornment of the adjacent pagoda, none that can be spent on embellishing the monastery itself. that would be as great a sin as if a monk should build one for himself. Besides that, it would be depriving the populace of much opportunity for gaining merit. There are a few monasteries of the Ponas here and there in the large towns throughout the country. These Brahmin priests were originally brought captives from Manipur. Manipur, where is that? All right, look up where Manipur is. Manipur. I know I should know. It's like northwest of Arakan. Oh yeah, a little inland, but I was right. Kind of. Say it's like directly north. It's on the northwest coast of Myanmar, and it's actually in India. Well, currently, it's a state or a region. I don't know of India, south of Assam. I can't pronounce the name of the river here, but Brahmaputra. It's just south of that, east of Bangladesh. All right. Now that you have your mental image, we can proceed. Once I find my spot. Totally forgot why I was even looking that up. I'm kind of lost. Getting married, a few monasteries here throughout the country. These Brahmin priests originally brought handles from Manipur and have been employed as astrologers. Okay. Have been employed as astrologers ever since. Their ranks being occasionally recruited by new arrivals. One of the requests preferred to Colonel Symes on his embassy to Ava. Ava. Fuck. I should know where Ava is, but I don't. I don't know. I don't know why I'm holding myself to such a high geographical standard all of a sudden. I can barely pronounce like 30% of the words in this book. Ava, Burma. Okay, so I feel like that's not. So Ava, it took me to the city of Mandalay. Okay, so it just seems kind of far from where we're talking about. New arrivals of the request on his embassy to Ava. A second, I'm going to mark my page and do a little more Google searching. City of Ava, Burma. Okay. The Kingdom of Ava was dominant. That's it. The kingdom. That's why it sounds familiar. Is a city. It was a kingdom that took over a little bit, but the city of Ava, ancient capital city of central Myanmar. Okay, so it's a city that Google Maps will not direct me to because I guess it doesn't really exist anymore. That's where I'm getting at with this, my little bit of research I just did. Man, you can't just Google some stuff. You really got to like research most of the stuff in the book, which is why it's a terrible book to read on stream. Colonel, where is the word Colonel? Governor, Colonel Sima was, I'll restart the sentence. One of the requests preferred to Colonel Symes on his embassy to Ava in 1796 was that he would persuade the Governor General to lend Brahman and his wife to the capital. Send a learned Brahmin and his wife to the capital. The race has been maintained tolerably pure. In the Pana is readily distinguishable in the streets from the Pangye. The astrologers muster naturally in the greatest force in Mandalay, and the monastery there is situated in a magnificent grove of trees south of the town and close to the cemeteries. Unlike the native religious, they do not raise their houses on posts above the ground, but follow the Indian custom of having the mat covered earth from their floor. Foreigners are not admitted into their temples, but there is no objection to the images being brought out by the Pona for exhibition for his friends. They worship Krishna and 25 other deities, but no congregation few of their faith coming to Mandalay. and those laymen who were carried away at the same time as themselves into captivity, having turned into the Buddhist faith. No Yahan is allowed to have a separate monastery built for him until he has spent 5 full wa under the discipline of a prior. These Lents must also be consecutive, according to their seniority. In this respect, the monks obtained names. Thus, a Pian Sin who has spent 5 years, which of course is implied by the wa, is called Anuti, and is a fit object for the pious to honor by erecting a special kyong for him. When he has been 10 years in the order, he is addressed as Miza Te, and those who have remained steadfast for 20 years attain the full honor of Mahate. Such a self-denying man is always sure of a magnificent funeral when he dies. It is a very good point about the life in the monastery that the great austerities and absurd mortifications of the flesh indulged in by Brahminical houses find no place with the Buddhists, who reject them as unnecessary and unprofitable. The life of the initiate is one of constant self-denial. All superfluities and luxuries are renounced. All that is calculated to excite the passion is forbidden. But there are no revolting self-inflicted penances such as are regarded as meritorious in themselves by the followers of the Hindu creed. Fasts and penitential deeds are indeed recommended to those living in the world, but that is because such methods are the best means for weakening the passions and increasing the power of the spirit as against the flesh. They are not a part of perfection. They are not even on the direct way to the attainment of perfection. That is only to be achieved by meditation, by pondering meditation, by pondering on the various aspects of the substances and truths in the world. Therefore, the Pian Sin do not make any difference except in the case of the very austere, in the observance of the appointed duty days, during which it is incumbent on the laity to abstain from food up till midday. After noontide, the Yahan never eat. Considerable scandal is sometimes caused by the trinkets of sundry of the weaker vessels. They sit all day with their back to the sun, and if in the afternoon they feel hungry, they ask a scholar if it is yet noon. The Willie Kyong Tha, thinking to escape a thrashing on the morrow, promptly answer that it is a good way off 12 o'clock yet, and brings wherewithal to solace the hungry religious. The falsehood or suppressio veri, I guess that's Italian, or sorry, what's it called? Latin. On the part of the scholar is a venial offense at his age, and the Yahan escapes sin, for if he breaks the law, it is because he was deceived. Again, Englishmen are often puzzled to know, in a country where even now clocks are by no means common, and where they are found usually show the wrong time, how it is that the people know what o'clock it is. The matter is simple enough that the sun is to be seen for its course. It's pretty nearly the same all the year around, and the Burman is tolerably skilled in guessing the time from its height or from the length of the shadow thrown. But it is different during the rainy season, when the sun is often not to be seen for a week at a time. Here, however, so say the Yahans, whom it most seriously concerns, a singular dispensation of natural steps in their aid. The cocks and hens of Buddhist countries are not as the tame villatic fowl of the Western lands. I do not refer to their powers of flying, which are sufficiently irritating to hungry life-taking voyagers, but to the fact that the cocks crow at stated hours 4 times a day, at sunrise, noon, sundown, and midnight. They thus inform the inmates of the kyong when they must cease eating for the day, and enable them to obey the provisions of the Patimak. This useful acquirement of the Buddhist Chanticleer, that's a word I'm curious about. What is Chanticleer? Chanticleer. Chantic. A name given to a rooster, especially in a fairy tale. Curious, what is a fairy tale rooster looking like? All right. The cock and the fox. I'll leave that be. Um, I have lost my position again. I think I'm on the right side of the page. I'm going to be... The Buddhist chant. So, this useful acquirement of the Buddhist Chanticleer was acquired in a singular way. Sundry books of the Bedin were burnt as containing unlawful Kabbalistic teachings. Among these was the Atapan Bedin. When the fire had died out on the barn door, flock came and pecked at the ashes, and so assimilated the astronomic lore contained in the book. I never had the opportunity of watching any particular cock to see if he actually crowed 4 times a day, at the times reported. They fly about so that for purposes of observation they might just as well be a jungle fowl. Thus even the powers of nature conspire for the well-being of the monks. It has been shown how the laity provide them with food and splendid dwellings. It may be unhesitatingly asserted that the most luscious fruits and the most delicate viands all find their way to the monasteries. A single instance will show to what an extent this is carried in jungle places, where in the dry season there is often a great dearth of water. One spring is always set apart for the kyang, because it would be a great sin, as well as being unpleasant for the yahan, to drink water which had been stirred up. For that reason, would be more likely to contain animal life. This reservation often compels the entire village to walk a mile or more for a supply of water, a very serious inconvenience to the easygoing Burman. In order that strangers and passers-by may have no excuse for drinking from the monastic well, a yellow cloth is hung over it from a bush or post erected for the purpose. Here again a stumbling block and the stone of offense is set up in the way of the ignorant or unreflecting foreigner. Everything near the monastery is rendered sacred, not unmerely when it is enclosed in the Para One, but as far as the prior may choose to proclaim it. This is especially common in the case of the large tanks of bricked reservoirs, which the pious dig in many parts of the country. These are frequently well stocked with fish and turtle, and when the monks declare them sacred, the fish often become wonderfully tame from the abundant food that is brought them by the yahans. Right? Solicitous as to their welfare, a regular thing about after worship in the Arakan Pagoda at Mandalay is to go and feed the great turtle in the tank at the back of the cloisters. There are rows of women selling balls of cooked rice, cakes, and other delicacies which the pious buy for the consumption of the sacred reptile. There was a great consternation when in March 1879 the tank dried up, and many of the huge creatures died before the people could get water enough from the river brought in chadis and household utensils to save them from such a sad fate. The circumstances was supposed to be a sign from the Nat guardians of the place of their abhorrence and anger at the shedding of the royal blood by King Thibaw in his Holocaust of February. Taking further, a totally innocent life seemed a rather singular fashion of expressing disapprobation. The dogfish of the Thindawa monastery, situated on a small island in the middle of the third and lowest defile of Irrawaddy, are particularly celebrated in having been referred to by every traveler in Burma. The little kyang, with its stone pagoda, has become a regular show place for all the passengers to Bawama Ba Ma. The great 5 feet long, gape-mouthed creatures seem to know their bounds and do not wander farther than a mile or so from their sanctuary. But this is far from being such a remarkable case as previous writers have seemed to imply. There is a tank with tame fish at the Maze Monastery near the Shwe Dagen Pagoda in Rangoon. All monastic tanks have fish more or less tame according to the good nature and sympathies of the Cenobites, and there is, or was at least, one other place in the Irrawaddy where the fish were as domestic as the dogfish of Theodawa. This was nearly the Kyak Lat pagoda and monastery on one of the numerous mouths of the great river. I knew the place well years ago, and there used to be a great conflict between the ill-conditioned, impious fishermen and the monks. The fish were of the species called Nga Dan, well known on English breakfast tables under the name of butterfish, and to provide for the unscrupulous appetites of the foreigner. People used to come at night to catch the unsuspecting Nga Dan. The Yahans had taught the fish to come and be fed when they beat on the bank and cried, tit 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 tit, and it was easy to bring them up at any time by following this method. The fishermen came about midnight and stamped on the bank, and when the Nagadan came, promptly whisked them out with a landing net. The scholars and novitiants had to take turn at watching for these marauders, and if any were discovered, the abbot and his entire posse comitatus, another Latin word stuffed in here as if there wasn't enough foreign words, sallied out to the rescue of his domesticated fish. If the impious life-taker was alone, or if the abbot's was the stronger party, the offenders were incontinently thrashed, and the young Koyik so and the young Koyans wielded their cudgels with an energy and knowledge of tender spots which ordinarily made the victims give up his vile practice for the future. I could keep reading, but this sounds like the Buddhist monks are like attacking fishermen, which is crazy. If, however, the lawbreakers were in force, then the abbot adopted less violent. These fucking fishermen were like coming at. Oh my god, these fishermen were being attacked by the poor Buddhist monks. Oh my gosh, real hatred is going on here. If, however, the lawbreakers were in force, then the abbot adopted less violent tactics, though it would have gone hard with any hardened sinner who might have ventured to strike a pian sin. He simply sat down and preached the law to them, recited the 10 precepts, enumerated the horrors of hell, and thus soon choked them off for that occasion at any rate. So they're like street preaching to these fishermen. That's hilarious. But the presence and the example of the English, and more especially their money, has a very bad effect on the weak-minded, unprincipled men. In Upper Burma, such a contest between wrongdoers and the upholders of the first of the 5 precepts could never have been prolonged. The Thihida, I keep mispronouncing this word. I give up. Where such scandals never occur is indeed an instance of it. And since the countryside would not rise to the aid of the pian sin, they had to adopt other measures to save their friends and enjoy peaceful nights. They persuaded a pious supporter to dig a large tank near the riverbank and to connect it by a narrow ditch with the river. Then they devoted the results of a whole morning's beggings to enticing the Nagadan into the tank, beating first at the mouth of their canal and then all along the banks of it till they had got all safe in the tank, which abutted on the enclosure of their kyong. But alas, this was done in the rainy season, and when the hot weather came round, the water got shallow and warm, and the fish sickened and died. In order to prevent and in order to preserve at least some of them, the survivors had to be taken back to the river again. Interesting. Wildlife management from the Buddhist monks. When I last was at Kiayak Lot, there were still a good number of the tame fish. Sorry, my face is becoming very itchy as I read. A good number of the tame fish and tame enough to allow you to stroke them and put gold leaves on their heads. But there were far from being as many as there should have been, had the villagers duly observed the teachings of the Buddha. The primeval simplicity of the people is fast fading away throughout the province. The traveling Englishman finds no difficulty in either getting people to sell fowls, or others still less hampered by doubts to wring their necks and cook them. Ah, corrupting the Burman people, like everywhere they go. Well, they can't corrupt Burman people everywhere they go, but they corrupt the whatever. The monastery sometimes has has a name of its own. More frequently, it is called by the Pali name of the town or pagoda near which it lies, or by that of its prior, the Thayet Da Kyong in Rangoon is so called from the magnificent mango trees that grow within it. Well known in Upper Burma is the monastery of U Sandima, or the Mangala San Taik, where King Mondan Min where King Mindon received his instruction in the religious texts, which he knew so well. The name is usually given by the founder after the consultation with the proposed head of the community, and it cannot be said that the consultation results in much originality here and there. Throughout the country, there are a few Yahite hermits who withdraw into solitude, into forests and desert places, and like the old Rathai, from which word, of course, the Burman term is derived, they live on wild fruits and roots and the chance alms of passerby. You just want to listen?
I just wanted to come say hi. That's all.
Hi. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna finish this chapter. There's one page left.
Okay, bye.
Uh, But as the Rathi were closely connected with the Brahmins, and as the custom is not recommended by the Buddha, nor looked up, looked upon with favor by the people, it is not a frequent occurrence. Occasionally, a very austere monk buries himself in the solitude of the jungle during the season of Lent in order the better to devote himself to meditation. But even this is not common. Nevertheless, in the rocks above Nyang Yu, near Pagan, there are a few cells dug out high up in the cliffs, which are always occupied, as any one who has gone out to shoot the rock pigeons which abound there will very speedily find. The Yahite comes down, confiscates the bag, and drives away the sportsman with terrible threats of future punishment. Such caves and holes in the rocks are not uncommon on other parts of the Irrawaddy, where the ascetic is able to climb up and find the stratum soft enough to hack out with the axe and hollow with his fingernails. There were a few such cells in the rocks and at the back of Mandalay Hill, and visitors to the sacred spot occasionally came across one of the hermits striding along, wrapped in thought, grasping an iron staff hung with ring and rattle of which warns the people to get out of the way and not disturb the holy man's meditation. A few go away from human society altogether, such as Saint Simeon Stylites isolated himself on a pillar, and the old Culdy monks from the north of England and in Scotland wandered off to the snowy wastes of Iceland. there to seek repose and relief from the turmoil of the world. It is said that the Thada, the grammar, was added to the Bitsagat, where that the hermits who had withdrawn to the jungle might not destroy the power of the sermons and lauds by mispronunciation. All right. Mandalay Hill is always occupied, for the spot is particularly sacred. And King Mindon used to send thither daily 100 fowls, which had been brought and saved from the death in the pot from bought and saved from in King Mindon used to send thither daily 100 fowls, which had been bought and saved from death, and the pious gave them plenty to eat. Similar proceedings caused the sneer of purchase for men they of purchas. So it's not spelt the way you think. Purchas caused the sneer of purchase. For men they had not a hospital that were thus hospital to fowls. For men they had the HADDE they had. I don't know why it's spelled that way. I mean, I know why it's spelled that way because everything in this book is misspelled, but I'll proceed. I'll just keep reading this until it makes sense. For men, they had not a hospital that were thus hospital to fowls. But this is hardly deserved at any rate in Burma. There in every monastery the Kapiya Dayaka has a stock of money raised by selling the presents given to the monks, which he devotes in charity to the well-deserving sick and to poor travelers, while anyone is welcome at all times to shelter and food in the kyong, as long as he conducts himself properly. The Yahite may be looked upon with pious awe for his austerities and mortifications of the flesh, but the ordinary piansin is more favorably regarded. The buildings of the monasteries and the giving of presents to their inmates is a constant strain on the generosity of the people. It is far more difficult to keep the balance of merit on the right side in Burma than in any other country. Almsgiving is a constant and imperative expense. In addition to regular and personal worship at the pagoda, in Tibet, wind or water drives the prayer machines for extinguishing a sin, and the good man acquires merit while he is snoring at night with his wife at his back. In some parts, practical householders are able to calculate exactly what it is set down to their credit by the expedience of having the prayer wheels turned when necessary by oxen. But nothing of this kind is practicable in Burma. You must pay your devotion in person, and unless you supplement them by almsgiving, your prospects toward a next existence are not such as your friends can regard otherwise than with concern. Fortunately, the mere holy receiver, the greater merit of the alms to support 100 ordinary men is not so much as to feed one yahan, and so on it is in increasing ratio. The merit of giving one single meal to a Buddha outweighs that of supplying 10 million Piet Zega Buddhas with food. Thus, the Kyangs are always well furnished, and their advantage in affording education to their children further gives them a hold over the country. It will be long before the number of monasteries decreases in Burma. Interesting. So, this is a pretty interesting paragraph. Section here. I'm now reviewing the chapter, I guess. I'll type into the chat so I can timestamp it, I guess. So this is a pretty interesting chapter. He talks about how socially there's the strain on the people, which is mentioned in previous chapters, but I think it goes more into detail and compares it to other Buddhist countries, which is interesting. People. It says that the merit of giving a single meal to a Buddha outweighs that of supplying 10 million to Piet Zega Buddhas with food. I think Piet Zega Buddhas, I can't Google it because Google will tell me nothing, or if it does, it'll tell me something after like 15 minutes, and I don't have that time to give. But from reading this, I think that people are trying to donate to like the highest ranking Buddha they can reasonably donate to as frequently as they can, so they can increase their merit. which is interesting. I think, I don't know, people do that in Western society, but for different reasons. They just feel like they will. It's a status symbol that reflects back onto them, which I guess is not so different. The section about the trained fish is really interesting. These Buddhist monks training fish is different than what I would consider moral, or training, like keeping fish to be so tame that you can pet them and interact with them and put little leaves on their head. And I get it, but I see how people would want to do that. It's an interesting thing for somebody to experience, interacting with a fish like a dog. This chapter kind of presents like these monasteries in Burma as being, close to the people, like a part of the community, where I imagine the monasteries to be more separate, like far away, kind of exclusionary, like yacht clubs. Like people, like people don't really. Yeah, that's a very good example. Like you have to drive to a yacht club. Very rarely can you walk to a yacht club. And if you can, then you probably, you probably might belong in the yacht club because the location is probably in a wealthy neighborhood. So that's a misconception that I had that is now corrected, I guess, or challenged. Maybe I'll do some more research on that. Interesting, the section about the Buddhist monks trying to buy live chicken from markets and trying to save them. Something we have like sanctuaries here, but and people will break into farms and steal the animals instead of buying them. And then the bit in this chapter about the monks beating up the fishermen, threatening. It doesn't necessarily say it beats them. They beat them up, but it heavily suggests that. If not beating up, threats of violence. Perhaps the monks blessed the weapons as they did in times of war, before beating up the fishermen. And this whole like conflict between the fishermen and the Buddhist monks is very, very interesting. I'm going to highlight that, or do something. I need a pen. But I really did not need all the descriptions of architecture and historical explanations. I think that was pretty redundant, and there are pictures in this book, I think. So why? I don't know, but okay. It's interesting. The Burmese says the monks are so well fed. They have the best fruit in all the land. That's a interesting nugget. I don't know. People giving cooked rice to feed to the fish. That's sort of interesting. The gold leaves, the never ditch, gold leaf on the head. This whole all right. Kind of reminds me of the TV show Game of Thrones, where like those monks are like walking around with like cudgels and like beating up people. Kind of interesting. But I'm gonna end the stream here. I hope this chapter was interesting. I think the latter half is far better than the beginning, and we'll pick up next time after I. So that was chapter 14. So we'll pick up a chapter 15, which is titled the Pagodas. So hopefully we don't get too many more architectural descriptions. But that chapter is pretty good. All right, see you next time. Bye.